Good morning, Morgan Township. I'm Chris George, and thanks for tuning in to the Blended broadcast today. Today is Wednesday, April 4th. Our top story, an intro to blended learning. Horn and Staker, authors of the book Blended, define blended learning as any formal education program in which students learn, at least in part, through online learning, with some element of student control over time, place, path, and or pace. It's important that we recognize that blended learning is not synonymous with online learning. Instead, we have to highlight the part of the definition that gives students some element of control. Secondly, the definition of blended learning includes a key element. This learning has to happen, at least in part, in a brick and mortar school. I think sometimes online learning gets a bad rap, but again, online and blended are not the same. Blended learning takes the best practices of brick and mortar learning and combines them with the power of online learning. It's important to be clear here. Blended learning is not simply online learning. Blended learning does not seek to use computers more often, but instead to use them differently. It isn't about layering on additional technology use, but about rethinking the way we are currently utilizing our tech and resources. Students learning in blended environments see a more personalized and interactive experience. The best technology can never replace a teacher. Blended learning seeks to honor both the brick and mortar teachers and giving them more time to connect and work with their students. When we move beyond a tech-enhanced classroom into a blended learning environment, when we find that our time working with students is increased. So often, one-to-one initiatives are interpreted in a way that makes classrooms less personal. During our exploration of blended learning, we're going to have the opportunity to see blended learning done well. Our goals are student-driven, and when we talk about blended learning, we're talking about so much more than the buzzwords and catchy, edgy phrases. We're talking about student learning experiences that improve our practices on a daily basis. Experts in the field recommend making blended learning a normal part of your classroom for many of the reasons outlined above. With the possibility of e-learning days on the horizon, we have a great opportunity to consider some of the changes we can make that will benefit our students overall, and not simply focus on the logistics of a day spent away from school. Our goal is to deliver high-quality learning every single day. So let our focus be on learning and not snow days. As you begin to consider how blended learning might fit into your classroom, aim to blend, pun intended, the procedures and structures into your regular routine. A great goal to give yourself is to try utilizing blended learning once per week. Now on to Galen with today's traffic report.
Thanks, Chris. I hope everyone had a safe and stress-free commute this morning. When we begin to look at implementing blended learning into our classrooms, we have to think about the logistics and the actual traffic of our classroom. If our destination is a classroom in which blended learning is successfully utilized, we have to first recognize that this isn't a one-size-fits-all approach. There are many different paths leading us toward the blended learning classroom. Let's take a look at the traffic as we make our way towards blended learning. There are several types of blended learning models and roads we can take. I'll provide an overview of the 4 major blended learning models. Throughout this process, we're going to talk about several different versions, but I'm going to focus on the first one, which is the highway station rotation. This model allows students to physically move through a fixed schedule, stopping at different stations. At least one, but it could be more than one, of these stations will include some kind of online learning component. The next is the highway flipped classroom. This is exactly what it sounds like. You literally change the way you teach your class so that the instruction or lecture or even the reading is done at home while the time in class is used for the guided practice or other activities. A lab rotation allows students to move through the fixed schedule in an online environment, but in the online environment that's in a lab space. And the flex model is the most fluid, and it allows students the opportunities to move through the learning experiences that are more fitting to their personal needs. So some students may have more online experiences than others. There are some other variations within these models, but like I said, we're going to focus on just those big 4 for now. No matter the road we take, the destination of blended learning is the same. Horn and Staker ask us, what's the best use of face-to-face class time given the migration of content and instruction to the internet? What these guys are saying is, how do we want to interact with kids? We all know that those 45 odd minutes that we have them are precious. So how do we want to use them? Do we want to impact their learning directly, or do we want to use the majority of that time lecturing? Of course, lecturing is an important component of education. We've got stuff that we want them to know. But The point of blended learning is that we take those components and spread them out among different models. Like I said, we're going to work on the station rotation model first. And the reason why is that it's kind of a best practice way to begin exploring blended learning within your classroom. Station rotation asks that you rethink your space, you rethink your classroom and how to use your school itself, in addition to utilizing the digital content. So it's sort of a two-pronged approach. In this model, students move, as I said, physically from one station to another. At each station, students experience a different method of learning. Imagine your classes in 3 different groups. One group is experiencing direct instruction in a small group with you, the teacher. The second group is working on an interactive or collaborative activity, and the third is working individually on a digital learning component. This model has many iterations, and any number of activities can be used in stations, but that's what makes this a blended learning model when at least one of the stations includes a digital component. In addition, you're going to see that some implementations of this, the entire class moves through the different stations. In this model, all students go through all stations. In some cases, and in best cases, teachers provide checklists for students either physically on a piece of paper or on their device. It's important to note that not all stations have to be digital. Again, in this structure, a station can be a manipulative or a collaborative learning activity. It can be them responding to a YouTube video that you find for them. And then it can also be small group direct instruction. Think of the implications for remediation and enrichment with this model. The most important and powerful element here is that utilizing the model and digital content, blending them, the teacher now has time to instruct and work with students in much smaller groups. This model can be implemented in as many ways as you have students' activities and objectives. With the station rotation model, and with any model of blended learning, we have to think about a number of things, and considering the movement and the traffic, if you will, is part of that design process. And to wrap up our blended learning broadcast, let's send it over to Diana with a weather update.
Thank you, Galen, and good morning. In Northwest Indiana, we know that the weather keeps us on our toes. From fog days to icy road conditions, missing school due to Mother Nature keeps our phones ringing at 5 a.m. quite frequently. What does this have to do with blended learning? Well, a lot. Let's be real here. If we start to look at what an online snow day looks like, it can get overwhelming. Planning for an online snow day considers helplines, teacher office hours, free and reduced lunch considerations, and much, much more. Not to mention the fact that we'd like to offer high-quality instruction on those days too. If blended learning is a part of your normal classroom, the shift that we make from a normal day at school to an unexpected day of learning from home is one that doesn't cause pure chaos. Sort of like the chaos that's caused by the first snow each year with our Indiana drivers. Now you might be asking yourself, where is my role in all of this when shifting from a traditional classroom to a blended learning environment? Well, there are a few big shifts that will happen in blended learning no matter what style of blended learning we experiment with. In order for blended learning to be successful, the role of the teacher will make a shift. Our teacher mindsets will make a shift. We will see ourselves shift from lecturer to facilitator, having fixed groups to dynamic groups. We'll change from explainers to interveners. We'll move from teaching content to teaching content, skills, and mindset. We'll shift from generalists to specialists, focusing on skills, specific skills, while working with specific students. This change of the weather asks us to let go of the idea that we have to teach in order for students to learn. However, lecture still has an important place in the blended learning model. In small group settings, teachers continue to deliver content or work with students one-on-one. Getting good at online snow days should not be our goal. That's a lot of work if we are only defining our success by the potential of a few days throughout the year. However, if we harness the power of blended learning, we can continue to find ways to reach our students on a regular basis, and online snow days will become a successful fringe benefit. Before we look ahead to our 10-day forecast, let's take a second to recap what we are seeing in our conversation today. 1, blended learning is not simply online learning. 2, blended learning allows us to customize an environment that works for our students and our content. And 3, if we blend our classrooms on a regular basis, e-learning becomes a natural fringe benefit.